this episode of the Mama Podcast, we talk to Lauren Fabianski, who is the head of campaigns and communications at Pregnant Then Screwed. We discuss discrimination in the workplace, what support there is available for pregnant women, and ways in which employers can make their workplaces more inclusive and supportive of pregnant employees and working mothers.
Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks so much for joining us. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here today representing Pregnant Then Screwed. Can you tell us a little bit about you personally and what's your setup and how you got working with the charity?
Yeah, so I've been at Pregnant Then Screwed for just over 2 years now. Previously to this, I worked in advertising for about 10 years and then other jobs before that. I had both of my children whilst I was working in advertising, and I kind of realised, particularly after I had my second child, that I wanted to go work in the charity sector. I wanted to go do something in women's rights. I wanted to work a bit more flexibly than advertising was allowing me to. This was just on the cusp of the pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of flexibility. I had to do a lot of travel. I wanted to see my children, grow up. They were very small. So I described this unicorn job. I remember it very vividly. I was on holiday with my husband. We were in this little cabin in Wales. And I said, this is what I want. This is the kind of charity that I want to work with. I want to work remote. I want to work flexibly. And he was like, okay, well, it sounds like a bit of a unicorn, but now you know what you want, you might more easily find it. And then the next week I saw this role advertised at Pregnant Then Screwed, and I just went for it, and it was like stars aligned and it was brilliant. So yeah, my very first week on the job at Pregnant Then Screwed, the charity had just secured a debate in Parliament about childcare. And I went straight in, hit the ground running, had to watch the debate, write an article for Grazia about it, which was going to be published the next morning. And I just remember thinking, this is like straight in at the deep end, and it's not really stopped since, but I love it so much. I love it. I get to see my kids. I work from home in this office here. My husband also works from home. He works flexibly. So we've got quite a good work-life balance set up. We maybe I go down to Parliament once a month or something like that, and my husband travels about twice a month, and it works so well for us. I feel so lucky to have this kind of role that I feel passionately about, and to be able to do it around my children and my caring responsibilities and my family. I know I'm in a very privileged position, and I love it so much.
How long have you been there? I absolutely love your office, by the way. It's very, very fun.
Yeah, just over 2 years now. I started in August 2021. Yeah.
So cool. I do sometimes think when you I won't talk about manifestations, I think it's a bit of a hot topic, but sometimes when you put stuff out there to the universe, it just happens for you, it's really intentional. And then you saw that job. So cool. It sounds like you got the perfect setup, and with 2 little ones, flexibility is everything, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that manifestation is definitely my kind of thing. I have some friends who are really, really into it, but I think it really helps for you to know exactly what you want. I listed every aspect of this job that I was looking for, and I think until you define that, how are you going to find it? And I think that's what helped. Yeah.
So I think the mission is probably in the title a little bit. Yeah. But can you tell us a little bit more about Pregnant Then Screwed and what the mission is, I guess?
Yeah, so Pregnant Then Screwed's been going for about 7, maybe 8 years now. We were founded after our CEO experienced some really bad pregnancy and maternity discrimination. She found out that she was pregnant. She was having a high-risk pregnancy. she was working for a children's charity at the time, and she informed her employer that she was pregnant, and she was fired by voicemail the next day. And she thought, it's okay, the law will protect me. And then she found out actually it doesn't all the time, really. And because she was having a high risk pregnancy, she wasn't able to, pursue any sort of claim for discrimination within the very tiny window, which I think we'll get on to talk about a little bit more. So she just had to let it go. But she was rightly very angry about it, very frustrated. And after her child was born, she created a website, the first iteration of Pregnant Then Screwed, for people to share their stories anonymously about discrimination that had happened to them in the workplace. And it really grew from there, partnering with brilliant volunteers who came forward, who were experts in PR, experts in law, experts in HR, who started to volunteer their time. And it's grown and grown from there. We now have 11 full-time staff, over 120 volunteers who help women now who are experiencing pregnancy and maternity discrimination. We give them free HR advice. We have a mental health support line. We have a benefit advice line. We have a mentoring program. If you're going to employment tribunal, we have a coaching service. It's really rapidly expanded as a charity.
My gosh, that is huge. I didn't realize just how big that is. So how many pregnant women, experience discrimination? And is that a common example that you've just given? What are the most common challenges that pregnant women and new mothers are facing at the moment then?
So, yeah, that's a very common example, I would say. The government's own research found that 54,000 women a year, every single year in the UK, are pushed out of their job for pregnancy and maternity discrimination. So this might happen when they're pregnant, it might happen when they've recently returned from maternity leave, but essentially it's because they got pregnant and they had a child. And it's huge, it's rife. And you might think 54,000, that can't be right. That's 1 in 9 pregnant women. That's 1 woman every 10 minutes in the UK. But that sounds ridiculous. If that was really happening, I would know about it. And it's probably happened to somebody that, you do know. It's probably happened to a friend, a family member, a colleague. And one of the reasons that it sounds so shocking is because a lot of it is covered up. A lot of the women that do challenge this behaviour, and not everybody can challenge the behaviour, the actual percentage of that 54,000 that take their case to employment tribunal, I think, is less than 2%. It's very, very small. But they might challenge it internally. And then they're gagged. They're gagged with something called a confidentiality agreement or a non-disclosure agreement, which means that they're given a little bit of money. It's often not very much money. It can be, £2,000-3,000 for their silence, and they're not allowed to talk about what happened to them. So if it did happen to your friend, they wouldn't even be able to tell you.
And that's why.
Unbelievable. Sorry, Heidi, you carry on.
Yeah, I'm just in shock. I mean, those numbers are just phenomenally high. And I assume that the NDAs are being signed by women because they're getting paid this extra bit of compensation, which otherwise they wouldn't get. Is that the reason why they're signing them?
Yeah, if you think, you've been bullied, you've been harassed, you've been pushed out of the workforce, you feel that you can no longer do your role, or you're not being given the option to continue your role, and you're pregnant, or you've got a very, very small human at home, and you don't know where your next paycheck is going to come from. A lot of women are presented with, well, you can sign this bit of paper and we'll give you a few £1,000s. And at least that gives you a little bit of stability to get through the next few months. Or you can not sign the bit of paper. You can face 10, 20, 30,000 pounds in legal fees and try and challenge it and try and, get some compensation without a silence agreement. And the reality is the majority of people don't have 30 grand sat in the bank to take a risk on an employment tribunal. It's not realistic. So they feel that they have no other choice but to sign these agreements. And it can be so damaging. It can be so damaging to their mental health. It further perpetuates this culture of silence, sweeping things under the rug. It allows employers to operate with impunity because they know there isn't really any access to justice in the UK. If there's these huge fees up front, they know they can get away with it. And they know that they just need to get somebody to sign this little bit of paper, pay them a small amount of money, and they can do it again. So it's really, really bad in the UK. And it's one of the reasons that we are campaigning as a charity to end the use of non-disclosure agreements in the cases of pregnancy and maternity discrimination.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, we were talking just before, and I had my own personal experience, which I had a top position in a big organization, and just the way that you can't explain it. I think, like, just once you've had a baby, you're a completely different person, or the hormones that you experience. And we talked before as well that this can happen whilst you're pregnant, and then you go on to have a baby within that short time period as well. But I think even if you think you would have the strength before, which, like, that can just go, it can just disappear, because so much has happened to your body and your mental state. You just become completely different. And it seems that it's all stacked in favor of organizations, which is just so sad.
It really is. It's a life-changing time. There's so many physical, mental challenges that women and families are experiencing. And then, if it's happening after the child's been born, then there's the sleep deprivation on top of that. And I think one of the big reasons, on top of the costs, that women are unable to challenge this behaviour is that you only have 3 months from the point that you are discriminated against to raise a tribunal claim. It's actually 3 months minus 1 day. And you have to have gone through your internal grievance procedures and all of those kinds of things in that time frame as well. So what we hear all the time is women phoning our HR line and saying, right, this really terrible, terrible thing happened to me at work last year. I'm finally in a position where I feel like I want to do something about it. And unfortunately, we have to tell them it's too late. You might be able to pursue this, but there is a very real risk that when it gets to court, it will be flagged that you didn't apply within the window, and that will count against you. And that's why that's one of Pregnant Then Screwed's longest running campaigns, to extend that time limit. We are campaigning for it to be a minimum of 6 months, but we think it should be much longer, ideally a year, from the point that discrimination occurs. And I would like to say, I know this is very, very depressing, so just a little glimmer of hope for women who might be going through these things right now, or maybe, you are caring for somebody who is in your role, who is experiencing some sort of discrimination in the workplace right now, who's not going to have that money in the bank account. But Pregnant Then Screwed, if you phone us when the discrimination is occurring, when it's starting to occur, when you think you might be about to be discriminated against, or very recently, you can speak to a HR advisor, one of our brilliant volunteers, and they will tell you what to do. They will tell you what you need to be recording. They will give you all the advice that you need. If they think that you're going to have a legal claim, we will refer you for an hour pro bono legal advice. You don't have to pay a penny for it. And they'll tell you whether they think you would have a case at tribunal. From that point, it's up to you what you do. You can instruct your own lawyer. It definitely doesn't have to be the lawyer that you spoke to at Pregnant Then Screwed. It could be anybody from anywhere in the UK. Or you can decide that you want to represent yourself, because that's going to be the most financially viable option for you. And if you want to do that, we will pair you up with a mentor who understands the tribunal system, and they will give you that emotional support, because it can be very challenging. It can be very draining. It can take a very long period of time. So we know how valuable it is for these women to have somebody with them who gets it, just to keep them going.
That's fantastic. You're obviously doing amazing things. And I'm just thinking for all the healthcare professionals that are listening as well, you know, if a mother confides in them and lets them know what's going on, then obviously they can signpost them to your organisation, which is obviously doing fantastic things. What other support are you able to give to women that feel that they've been discriminated against? Because you've obviously got lots of volunteers on your base as well, which I think is amazing. We'd love some more volunteers.
Our volunteers are brilliant. You know, they are the lifeblood of Pregnant Then Screwed. We love them so much. We're so thankful for the time that they give us. So some other services that we have mental health support advice line. So we set this up with the intention that if you are experiencing pregnancy and maternity discrimination, that can be hugely psychologically damaging. You know, you can feel like you don't have anybody to talk to. You might not want to talk to your employees. You might have had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk to anybody about it. That's why we set this up to have a bit of a helping hand throughout that period. However, because of the broad nature of reasons that somebody might need mental health support, particularly when they've got small children or they're pregnant, you can actually speak to them about anything that you need mental health support with. They will help you with that. So we've got that service. We have a benefits advice clinic that's opened in the past year. It's a new one where you can book an appointment with a specialist in benefits, and they will tell you things that you might be entitled to, which would be particularly useful if you've lost your job, or maybe you, as is the case for a lot of women, I know it was definitely the case for me, I didn't really understand the costs associated with having a small human until they came into my life. I didn't really think about it in that much detail. So, you might be wondering if there's any additional support that you might be entitled to, and they will help you with that. And we have a new coaching service as well for somebody who might be looking for a career change or confidence boost to change careers, where you can book an appointment, and that's another new service that we've got. So if you just go onto our website, there's a little button at the top. It says I need help, and it will point you to all of our services. You can find the right service for you. I would really, really be so grateful to any healthcare workers if they could point people there. If you suspect that anybody that you're speaking to is being discriminated against or might need a bit of help, with their benefits, with their mental health, with anything, please signpost them to Pregnant Then Screwed, and our volunteers will look after them. One other service that we've launched is an email advice service, because we realised that not everybody likes to talk on the phone. Not everybody's able to talk on the phone. So we have introduced in the last year that you can email the HR advisors now, and they will respond to you via email. Maybe you could even do that whilst you're at work if you wanted to.
Yeah. That's so cool. You literally cover everything now, like any kind of support and fallout that could happen as a result of being not treated properly by organisation. Amazing. In terms of the broader policy stuff that you guys work on, I know you said that you go to Parliament once a month and stuff. Can you talk what kind of change are you trying to affect in that space, and what big successes have you had?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is look at all of the systemic and cultural reasons why this discrimination is happening to women, and then try and fight for legislation to change, to bring about a societal shift, really. And the biggest areas that we think need change are access to good quality, affordable childcare, which I will talk about in a little bit more detail. Better entitlements to flexible working, which again I will dig into, parental leave reform. They're our biggest campaigning areas. And then we have some secondary campaigning areas like extending the employment tribunal time limit, which I've mentioned, the end of the misuse of non-disclosure agreements. We're also looking at how we could introduce some changes to the Equality Act for parents who have a disabled child or a child who has a long-term health condition. Because if you if you were diagnosed with cancer or you are diagnosed with a new disability, you have all of these rights at work that your employer cannot discriminate against you for those things. They have to give you time off for medical appointments, those kinds of things. If you have a child who is diagnosed with a disability or long-term health condition, you do not have any rights at work to have to take that child to appointments, to, care for that child. And we think that's absolutely terrible. So we're trying to change that as well. Which would you like me to talk about first? Flexible working, childcare, parental leave?
Oh, all of them. I find it fascinating. Tell me about all of them.
Yeah.
And I'd be particularly interested to see if you're doing any campaigning regarding sort of maternity and paternity leave when you've lost a baby as well. Because I'm hearing at the moment some shocking stories of massive, huge companies that if a mother suffers the loss of a child or she's suffering a miscarriage, for example, there's no leave entitlement at all. She's got a couple of days off sick and that's all she's allowed to take, which is just horrendous. So I wonder if you're doing anything around that as well.
Yeah, so there are some other charities who are leading the way with that kind of campaigning. And I think one of the things we really struggle with at Pregnant Then Screwed is we're all so passionate about what we do. We want to campaign on everything. But if you look at the campaigning team, we are like 3.5 people really in time. And we have to be so strict with the campaigns that we lead on and the campaigns that we support.
I totally appreciate that. We've got the same problem here. Massive to-do list and I just have to focus on one thing at a time.
It's really, really hard because we want to do everything. So with campaigns on extending pregnancy loss leave, bereavement leave, we try and raise up the other charities who are doing that. I'm sure you're very familiar with the brilliant work of Mylene Class and was it Bliss about if you suffer a miscarriage that you won't have to suffer 3 miscarriages in order to receive
investigation.
Yeah. So those kinds of work, we will post about them on our channel, we will celebrate them, but we're not leading the way on that campaign at the moment. However, I would just like to caveat, we're not leading the way on any campaigning on that for the next year because we've just had to sign off all of our strategy. What we might be doing in 2025, that might all change depending on how we progress with our leading campaigning areas. Something I do know though from a small piece of work that we did this year, we ran a training program for the first time for HR managers and business owners of small to medium businesses about fertility and pregnancy loss at work and workplace policies. It was in partnership with a company called Best Beginnings. It was very successful. We are doing it again next year. So if anybody knows somebody who might benefit from signing up to that, please do. You can apply now for next year's program. And that uncovered some really scary statistics that showed that such a small percentage of employers, I think it was, just a third, 33.5% of HR managers had a pregnancy loss policy in their workplace. And only 13.5% were happy with how the company supports employees experiencing pregnancy loss, which is really scary because if there's no policy, if there's no thought that's gone into what do you do when this happens to one of your employees, it leaves that employee open to such risk of discrimination during that time. And we're trying to change that. We're trying to get more employers to think about these policies before the event happens, so that these, reactive, bias-led gut decisions are not made about those employees. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that area. In terms of parental leave, I know this might sound shocking because we're seen as, a charity for mothers, but one of our biggest campaigning areas is to extend paternity leave.
I think that's great.
Yeah, and that's because as long as society considers having a child to be something that only happens to and only affects women, then it will be women who continue to be penalised for that. We see there's lots of research that shows when families have children, a woman's earnings go down and she's perceived to be less competent and less capable in the workplace. In contrast to that, a father's earnings actually go up in comparison to childless men in the workplace because they're seen to be more capable once they become a father. How does that make sense? It doesn't.
It's bizarre, but I'm not surprised, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's just, yeah.
And there's a lot of single dads as well that are having to juggle their contribution to the childcare.
There absolutely is. And there are some brilliant dad groups that we've seen grow quite significantly over the last few years that are doing a brilliant job in campaigning on the interest, particularly for single dads, or dads to extend their paternity leave as well in collaboration with this. I really like to shout out Dope Black Dads. They're brilliant. Music Football Fatherhood, led by Elliot Ray. He's a brilliant campaigner and speaker. And Daddy Life. So again, anybody who's listening who has a dad in the appointment who might need a bit of guidance, need a community, need some support, I would really recommend all three of those organisations. So we are campaigning to extend paternity leave. We want it to be, for the start, at least 6 weeks at 90% of salary, but then we'd like there to be additional leave after that at the national living wage. We are also campaigning to extend maternity pay to national living wage as well, because it's just 44% of national living wage at the moment, and it's a cost of living crisis. It's impossible.
Yeah, and aren't we particularly bad in comparison to like the rest of Europe and other countries, which you wouldn't necessarily expect?
We're so bad. We're really, really bad at it. And people don't think about that because so many comparisons are drawn against the UK and America. And you think, well, Americans have no entitlement to anything. So in comparison to them, we're brilliant. This is amazing. But then if you actually look at other countries in Europe, we're one of the worst. We have one of the least entitlements. We have one of the lowest pays. But lowest pay for maternity leave, worst entitlement for paternity leave. Yes, we're really not doing a good job. And we did a big piece of work earlier this year that actually proves countries that have longer periods of paternity leave have stronger economies, which is, again, ridiculous. It's a no-brainer. It's an open goal for the government. So that is something that we are campaigning on.
Yeah, well, that's it. There's so much like return on investment for like women in senior leadership positions and stuff, and like being more balanced generally from a gender perspective. And that's what all of this amazing policy stuff that like you're delivering on, that's what that allows you to achieve, right? It's much better for the economy and for like the bottom line. So it's just getting people to see that, like people of power not only see that, but to kind of disrupt the status quo and make a difference. And that's why all of these things like hang together like so well. And hopefully, I mean, you're already making like big kind of seismic shifts, but hopefully we'll just see it like getting better and better and more equal. And one
yeah.
day we'll be like Scandinavia, where we get like 2 years off, and you can take it when you want, and the father has it too.
That would be the dream. Yeah. And I think there are so many benefits to extended paternity leave. You know, there's studies from Scandinavian countries that show it decreases divorce rates, that we know that it will make significant impacts on NHS mental health spending, both for the mothers and fathers. So, you know, the longer term savings there, again, are huge. And there's the economy angle that we've been talking about. There's employee happiness, you know, in the workplace. You know, I've heard some horrible stories from fathers who, you know, had to go back to work after 2 weeks, particularly fathers where in the first 2 weeks their child didn't even leave the hospital, or had only just returned home from the hospital due to birth complications, and then they have to go straight back to work. They can see that their wife is really struggling, and they have to walk out of the door with a smile on their face, go into the office, pretend everything's okay, come home, sit in the car, cry, and then come back into the house and, yeah, again, with a smile on their face, pretending that nothing's wrong. And that's just, it's awful what we do to fathers. It's awful what we do to mothers. You know, families deserve that time to be together, to bond, to create a lot of these routines that last throughout childhood together. You know, even things like the mental load, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. A lot of habits and a lot of things that disproportionately then weigh on women for the rest of their life, routines and things that women are expected to pick up for the rest of their life, are because there wasn't that opportunity for the dad to be there when those routines were set and established at the start of life. So yeah, the changes from paternity leave alone would be huge. But like you said, all of these things are interconnected, and just solving paternity leave alone, whilst it would be a big step, is not going to completely eradicate something that we call the motherhood penalty, because we know then there's the issue of our unaffordable, inaccessible childcare system. There is very little right to access flexible working, and the misuse of non-disclosure agreements, and all of these things feed into each other and self-perpetuate, which is why we are campaigning across all of them to try and bring about this big shift.
Yeah, it's incredible. I was like, Heidi, and for you as well, you know, just as like the founder of Mama Academy, and just how much of a difference you can make as an individual when you actually like put your mind to it and you have a purpose and a mission. Like what you do and Pregnant Then Screwed just makes such a huge difference to people. It's so good. It's amazing.
And it's all off the back of an unfortunate situation.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I guess we're just very passionate about not letting that happen to other people.
Absolutely.
About, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can I ask a really silly and daft question? I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, employers are employing women. And to me, it's a bit obvious that if they're of a certain age, they are going to have babies. I mean, obviously not everyone does, but the majority do, right? So it shouldn't really come to a huge surprise to them if they suddenly announce that they're pregnant. And I'm just wondering, why would they then discriminate and push them out, you know, get rid of them, when they've then got to re-recruit, and they may recruit another woman that will then get pregnant in a year's time? It doesn't make any sense to me why they would do that, apart from, are they just recruiting women as a tick box exercise because it kind of covers the diversity and, you know, that box, and they just are intentional right from the start that as soon as they're pregnant, they're going to get rid of them because they see it as a disruption to the workplace? Do they? Are they worried that they're going to have lots of time off sick? Are they worried that they're going to have lots of time off to care for their child? I'm just wondering what the thought is behind their actions.
Yeah, so that's a big question. So to start with, we know that employers avoid hiring women who are of, in brackets, childbearing age. We know that discrimination occurs in employment processes. And then the reason that I think they do that is because, yes, they perceive that they're then going to go off for a long period of time. And currently that is something that only women tend to do, which is one of the reasons why we want to campaign for longer paternity leave, because then it's not just something that women do. Men also take a long period off. Therefore, you shouldn't be discriminated against women. It's everybody that takes that length of time off. I feel it's very important to say during this moment that our campaigns are not just for birthing parents. We want all parents to be able to access proper parental leave, and that includes adoptive parents. It includes kinship carers, all new parents who would want to bond with their family at the start of that journey. So other issues that feed into this are, we have a huge culture of presenteeism in the UK. Particularly in office jobs, there's games of desk chicken going on. Who's going to be the first person to get up and leave at the end of the shift? And we know that employers, even after the pandemic, even after so many people started remote working, there's been this huge shift for people to get back into offices, and blanket flexible working agreements that had been made throughout the pandemic, throughout the last few years, where everybody thought we were making progress in this area, are just being revoked. At very big companies, they're just not looking at things on an individual case-by-case basis anymore. They're saying, right, that's it. Everybody now has to go back to the office. Everybody has to be in the workplace. Everybody's getting their compressed hours agreements removed. And one of the reasons that is happening is we know that not all HR managers and employers are actually monitoring the success of flexible working policies within their workplace. They're not tracking it. So these decisions are being made on gut feeling, with bias of predominantly male boards, because there are fewer women on boards than men. So it all feeds in. It's all interconnected. So that's a huge thing. And I think it's quite important to say here as well that flexible working is not just remote working. There's so many different ways that people can work flexibly. You can work part-time, you can do a job share, you can do flexi time, you can have compressed hours, you can have predictable hours, is actually a kind of flexible working. So when we say that we want more flexible working rights, we don't mean everybody should be able to do their job from home. For example, if you're a midwife, that's impossible. But you should be able to access a part-time role. You should be able to do a job share. You should be able to have compressed hours, or predictable hours, or whatever works for you. So that's a huge thing. And then the other reason that we think discrimination occurs in that point is completely unaffordable, inaccessible childcare system. We have one of the most expensive childcare systems in the world. It fluctuates between first and third place in terms of how expensive it is, depending on how you cut the data, because there's lots of different ways to cut the data. You might have seen in the Spring Statement last year, there is a lot more funding that's gone into childcare at the moment. That was something that we campaigned for. We did a protest where we had 15,000 families took to the streets. We took over billboards that played the sounds of infants crying, across the country. We took petitions to Parliament. We really tried to get more childcare investment at that point. And we got over 4 billion, which is completely unprecedented. Nobody was expecting that amount of money. It was a huge point for celebration. Unfortunately, the problem is far from fixed, because what's happened with that 4 billion is the government haven't done a very good job of consulting with the sector on how that money is going to be spent. So what they've done is they've promised parents all of these free hours, but the hours are not going to fund the true cost of delivery for what's being promised. And what's happening now is providers are running at a loss. They are having to close down. They're not able to pay their staff what they're worth. I'm sure there's a lot of comparisons to the NHS in all of this. And it means that these brilliant early years workers who are in the sector right now are leaving the sector in droves because the job's not sustainable for them financially anymore, no matter how passionate they are about it. And what we need in order to be able to deliver all of these new hours that were promised by the government as part of this investment is even more workers. And there's not currently a credible plan to recruit or train those workers. So the sector is in a huge mess right now. And something we're very concerned about is a lot of parents in April next year, when they expect to take up these new free hours that were promised, are going to find that they can't actually redeem those hours because there's no providers left with any sort of availability to do that. So that's why we are still continuing to campaign on childcare and make sure that any expansion to the sector is sustainable for the sector. Otherwise, it's pointless. So we know employers see that it tends to be women that drop out of the workforce when they're looking at how much childcare costs, rather than men, because of the gender pay gap, which is something that they see when women get pregnant. Oh, well, they're going to leave anyway because they can't afford the childcare.
That makes sense. Okay, well, you're doing a fantastic job. Definitely keep it up. So what other ways can employers make their workplaces more supportive of pregnant employees? Is there anything else that they can do apart from like flexi hours, etc.?
Yeah, so flexible hours, brilliant. We would love to see employers list in job descriptions the different types of flexible working that could work for that role, because we know through a big piece of research that the Trades Union Congress did that parents do not feel comfortable asking for all of the flex that they need, because, you know, they feel they will be discriminated against just for asking for it, even starting that conversation. Whereas if you flip it on its head, so the flexible working is not something that an employee has to go to their manager for and, you know, state their case, and you know, a lot of that relies on individual relationships with managers rather than company-wide policies and things like that. If you flip it so that the job, when you are designing it, you're thinking, how could this work flexibly at that point? It makes it so much easier then for an employee to take up that flexibility if it's listed in the job description as an option. So if employees could start doing that, that would be brilliant. Other things that employees could do, obviously bigger employees, we would like them to offer any sort of childcare incentives as part of their recruitment packages. That would be amazing. There's a huge problem and something that I feel is very relevant for the listeners of your podcast, that a lot of students, of which a lot of the NHS workforce is technically a student, not currently entitled to access the government-wide childcare schemes, because they only apply if you're in employment, not if you're a student. So that is a big thing that needs to change. And parental leave policies. Please look at your parental leave policies. Look at your workplace, you know, fertility policies. Do you currently have a policy for employees who are going through IVF, for example? You need one. There's a lot that employers can do.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Is there anything else you just wanted to land before we sign off? This has been so insightful, and I've been like struggling to keep my mouth shut because I love this topic so much. It's never ending, right? There's so much to talk about, and I think everybody has some kind of personal experience on this, like one way or the other. So it's like quite a emotive topic. But is there anything anything else you wanted to just let our listeners hear?
No, I feel like I've covered everything. I've I know I've already said this, but I just cannot overstate the power that healthcare workers have to engage with people who are experiencing and suffering from all of the things that we've discussed today. And there is so much support out there. So please do signpost people to us so they can access it, because nobody has to go through this alone, even though the majority of us do. And we're really trying to change that.
Well, I've learned so much today. I really have. Thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us and taking the time out to explain all this to us. It has been really, really insightful and a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me, Heidi and Marissa. It's been so lovely to chat to you. I feel like I've just talked, but I'm so passionate about everything that I just, yeah.
That's been awesome. Thank you. And maybe we'll see you in series 2.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Bye.